Okay, let's dive in. Imagine this. A nation just completely fractured right on the edge. How do you actually stop that division from exploding into, well, chaos?
Yeah, how do you guide it towards something peaceful when everything's falling apart?
Exactly. It's a huge question, and it's really the core of what we're exploring today.
We're looking at Chapter 8, Part 2, From Split to Survive. It focuses on this really critical broadcast.
Right, the one right after that fictional coup aiming to divide Israel. Our listener wanted to understand, how did this specific communication try to keep things peaceful?
And it's fascinating because the book sets this up. You've got the secular state of Dan, the religious kingdom of Judah. This broadcast happens literally hours after the military move.
Peak uncertainty, fear would be everywhere.
Totally. And this broadcast by retired General X, it's not just news, it's strategic. Part 2, especially, is where the gloves come off.
How so?
It launches this sharp critique of the government they just ousted, but it also starts building the moral argument for why they did it.
Okay, so that's our focus for this deep dive, dissecting this broadcast. The message, the strategy behind it, the historical context it leans on.
There's a lot to unpack there.
Let's start with the timing again. Morning after the coup. What does that immediate timing signal?
Urgency. Absolute urgency. They need to stabilize the situation now. The population's reeling, confused, probably scared.
And the information lockdown controlled media, no internet. That's a massive part of it, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. It's about seizing the narrative immediately. Preventing panic, yes, but also stopping any counter-story from taking root before they've established theirs.
Total message control in a moment of crisis.
Precisely. Aimed at everyone, liberals, conservatives, the whole spectrum.
So let's get into that critique. General X goes right after Ben-Gvir and Smotrich. What's the angle there?
It's personal and political. He frames them quite brutally as Jewish ex-terrorists.
Wow, okay. That's strong language right out of the gate.
And claims they only got power because of Netanyahu. It immediately attacks their legitimacy, their very right to have been in charge, raises serious alarm bells.
And then the specific failures. Police crumbling under Ben-Gvir, finances under Smotrich.
He hits the fundamentals.
Huh.
Security, economy, things that affect everyone's daily life. He makes the critique feel very real, very immediate, not just abstract politics.
It paints a picture of state failure, essentially.
Exactly. And then he adds the prediction about Arab crime gangs expanding.
How does that fit in?
It links the alleged government failures directly to citizen safety, suggesting things are getting worse because of them and will continue to spiral. It broadens the impact.
Then there's the claim the recent war was political, hurting the economy. In that kind of tense moment, what's the effect of saying that?
It questions the government's core motives, suggests they may be sacrificed the country's well-being or people's wallets for their own power. That really erodes trust.
Okay, and then the broadcast pivots to the occupied territories. This seems like a really sensitive area to tackle.
Yeah. Extremely. And the way it's done is provocative. He contrasts treating the Palestinian Authority Abbas as an enemy.
Right.
While mentioning Smotrich supposedly once calling Hamas a good partner. It's a jarring comparison.
What's the intended impact of that? Highlighting hypocrisy? Danger?
Both, I think. It paints the previous government's approach as dangerously inconsistent, maybe even aligning with extremists in a way. It's meant to deeply unsettle people about their judgment.
And then the history lesson, the Jewish underground plot from '84.
Yeah, the plot to bomb the dome with a rock. Why bring that up?
It connects the dots, doesn't it? Links that past religious extremism to the present government, pointing to Ben-Gvir's alleged links, his third temple poster.
It's basically saying this isn't new. This dangerous ideology has been here, and now it's in power. Then comes the warning about a third intifada.
Upping the stakes dramatically. Real fear factor based on past trauma.
Exactly. And it gets even more specific, accusing Ben-Gvir of actions during the war.
The weapons diversion, taking them from the north and giving them to West Bank settlers.
Yes. That's an explosive claim. It suggests not just bad policy, but active betrayal of national security for an ideological agenda.
And the comparison to January 6th in the U.S., suggesting a planned insurrection.
That puts it in a globally understood context of undermining democracy from within. It frames the threat as internal, deliberate, and fundamentally illegitimate.
Then comes the red heifer thing. This might seem obscure to some listeners.
It might, but in the context of certain religious beliefs about rebuilding the temple, importing these specific heifers from the U.S. is a huge symbolic step.
Okay, so it's not just about cows.
Not at all. The broadcast frames it as a potentially catastrophic provocation. It cites experts warning this could ignite, literally, World War III.
So the government is painted as pursuing this, like, fringe religious goal at the risk of global conflict.
Precisely. Putting a deranged vision, as the speech calls it, above everything else, that's when the language gets really extreme.
Psychopaths with Messianic Judaism delusions. A ticking time bomb.
Yeah. The rhetoric is dialed up to 11. The goal there is to shock, to eliminate any lingering legitimacy, to make the coup seem like the only option to stop something truly awful.
So after tearing them down so completely, how does the broadcast pivot to justifying the coup itself? Build its own case?
It directly tackles the argument you'd expect. But the old government was elected, it was legal.
Right, the democracy argument.
And the response is bold. It asserts that some principles are above the law.
With that kill all the redheads example.
Exactly. It's deliberately absurd and shocking to make a point.
Yeah.
Just because something is legal doesn't make it right or morally acceptable.
So the argument is the government's actions were so fundamentally wrong they were illegitimate, even if technically legal.
Yes. And the principle they elevate is explicitly stated. Liberal principles are above any human law.
That's a massive statement. What does that signal for the new state of Dan?
It establishes a clear ideological foundation. It says, this is what we stand for, and these principles justify our actions against a regime that violated them. It's a rallying cry for their potential supporters.
And the specific example of Netanyahu supposedly deleting the law about incapacitation, how does that fit?
It serves as evidence for the claim that democracy was being dismantled. It shows checks and balances allegedly being removed, paving the way, the speech warns, for maybe deleting elections next.
Reinforcing the idea that this was a necessary intervention to stop a slide into dictatorship.
Right. Ending the madness, as the speech puts it. It frames the coup as a restoration of moral order and fundamental principles.
Okay, so you have this intense critique followed by the strong moral justification. How does all this actually work to prevent bloodshed? That's the key aim, right?
But the sheer intensity of the critique, painting the old guard as an existential threat, is part of it. It tries to create a sense of shared danger that cuts across old lines, makes resistance seem dangerous or even pointless.
And focusing on Ben-Gvir and Smotrich makes it personal, not just abstract policy failures.
Exactly. Concrete actions, specific people. It gives people tangible reasons to accept the change.
Those shocking images, the National Crisis Creation Center misnomer, World War III over heifers, they must be aimed at creating a strong emotional reaction.
Definitely. Fear, urgency, a sense that the situation was intolerable. It's meant to deter opposition by highlighting the catastrophic risks of the old path.
While the appeal to liberal principles shores up support for the state of Dan's side.
Gives them a positive banner to rally around, a moral high ground for the separation. Makes it seem less like a power grab, more like upholding values.
And grounding it all in specific examples, P&A, heifers, weapons, adds a layer of perceived credibility.
Makes it harder to dismiss as just rhetoric. It offers apparent evidence for the claims.
Plus the historical references, the potential future conflicts, it all amplifies the stakes.
Turns into deep-seated fears, uses historical memory to say, we can't let this happen again, or look what we're heading towards.
And we mentioned earlier, the broadcast also included reassurances about the safety of the detained leaders.
Right, from part one. That's crucial, too. It aims to lower the temperature, signal that this isn't about revenge, which could prevent backlash from their supporters. It's framed as corrective, not punitive.
So the overall strategy seems to be delegitimize the past completely, build a powerful moral case for the present action, and frame the future separation as necessary and principled, all to minimize violent resistance.
And if you look at the historical context, it uses the Jewish underground, tapping into Israel's history of resilience and moral debate. It resonates deeply.
The January 6th comparison grounds it in contemporary fears about democracy, too.
It makes it feel relevant beyond Israel's borders. And that core idea, principles above law, draws on Enlightenment thinking, giving it a philosophical weight.
Of course, none of this works without that initial media control.
Absolutely critical. That controlled environment lets this narrative land first, lets it sink in without immediate challenge.
It's a very sophisticated communication strategy, balancing warnings and reassurances for different groups.
Trying to build support while neutralizing opposition. It's a high-wire act.
You could almost see parallels with other major revolutionary moments, using powerful rhetoric to shift allegiance and justify drastic change.
For sure. Projecting authority, moral certainty, making the change feel inevitable.
So, wrapping up this part of the deep dive, General X's broadcast, part two, really sharpens the attack, lays out that stark moral vision based on liberal principles, and uses every rhetorical tool to try and ensure this national split doesn't descend into violence.
It's presented as the critical moment, the communication designed to steer Israel through this perilous transition peacefully.
It really leaves you thinking about the sheer weight words can carry in moments like these. Can a carefully crafted narrative, a moral framing, actually prevent bloodshed when a society is so fundamentally divided?
That's the lingering question, isn't it? And maybe for you, the listener, it sparks thoughts about the ethics involved. When, if ever, is it justifiable to place principles above the law? And what are the real long-term prospects for peace between two states born from such deep ideological conflict?